Um,
Sorry.
sure, not a problem. And the media, the Israeli media, and the international media are not showing the same story right now. The narrative is different. I'll talk about it in a few minutes during this program tonight. But I would start by saying that as a Jew and as an Israeli, this October the 7th was a turning point in Israel, in the Jewish world, in the world in general, and also in the media. I happened to visit in Israel twice since the that horrific Saturday, including a visit in Kibbutz Kfar Aza, which is 2 kilometers, 1.2 miles from Gaza border, and a kibbutz which lost 65 of its members that were murdered on that morning, and 18 were abducted to Gaza Strip. A very, very sad story. Beside other very sad stories of that day. I would say that the Israeli public was at the beginning, the first few weeks, and it related to the media because the media in Israel reflects probably the mood, was in trauma. It was traumatized by the event itself. 3,000 terrorists and mob crossing the border and murdering 1,200 people. Traumatized by the surprise, traumatized by the fact that the army and the police both were not there to protect Israeli citizens, and the shock and the surprise turned after a few weeks to an anger, and the people feel angry and upset and annoyed. And the point right now, their point of view is to support the war. And this background about the feelings, the atmosphere, the mood in Israel is important to understand the story of the media. I happened to be on Saturday night in the biggest rally for the hostages. As we know, 100 were released a few weeks ago, but around 130 are still kept in the tunnels in Gaza in unknown locations. And the atmosphere in Israel that they were forgotten. And the headquarters of the families started a campaign with the rally on Saturday night, a rally which lasted for 24 hours to commemorate 100 days of the war, to put it on the agenda again, the hostages, because it's quite clear that if Israel wants to bring them back, the only way is to have another deal with the Hamas. Whether we like it or not, the army cannot free and release the hostages. Out of 240, which were initially abducted, the army managed to release one out of 240. So it's now a question of a deal with a long ceasefire or continuing the war and hoping that the hostages survive, which is probably not the case right now. There are not all of them had survived. And I want to show a short clip that was released by the Hamas just 2 or 3 days ago. I think 2 days ago or 3 days ago, and I'll tell a story behind it. So Shachaf, can you please? As I said, this is released by the Hamas terrorist organization. There are some subtitles that we can see.
אז הילדה מסכנה.
אני נועה ארגמני, בת 26 מבאר שבע.
שמי יוסי שבאבי, אני בן 53.
אני איתי סבירסקי, בן 38 מתל אביב. אני מרגיש שהופקרתי פעמיים כבר. פעם אחת כשלא הגנו עלינו בבארי, ופעם שנייה כשלא מחזירים אותנו הביתה. נתניהו, בבקשה, תעצור את המלחמה, תחזיר אותנו הביתה. אנחנו בתנאים קשים פה, אין אוכל, אין מים. יש פה סכנה, כל הזמן נופלים טילים ליד איפה שאני נמצא.
אין מים, אין אוכל, כל האמצעים עוזבים פה. החיילים מתייחסים אלינו יפה. הם דואגים לנו עוד כמה שאפשר ואין הרבה אמצעים.
המצב שלנו, ככל שהמלחמה ממשיכה, הופך להיות קשה יותר, מסוכן יותר עבורנו, וזה חייבים לעצור עכשיו את המלחמה.
הייתי במבנה שנורה על ידי מטוס של כוחותינו, מטוס F-16 שירה 3 טילים, 2 טילים התפוצצו ואחד לא התפוצץ. במבנה ראינו כמה חיילי קסאם ו3 אסירים. אני, נועה ארגמני, איתי סבירסקי ויוסף שרעבי. לאחר שהטיל פגע במבנה שלנו, כולנו נקברנו בין ההריסות. חיילי הקסאם, חיילי החמאס, הצליחו להציל את החיים שלי ושל איתי, אבל לאחר מכן לא הצלחנו להציל את יוסי. יוסי לא שרד בשלב הזה. אחרי כמה ימים, 2 לילות, העבירו אותי ואת איתי למקום אחר, ובמהלך המעבר איתי נפגע מכוחותינו, נורא, ולא שרד. אני נותרתי פצועה עם חבלות בראש, כל הראש בחתכים, פצועה בשאר הגוף. איתי סבירסקי, יוסף שרעבי, שניהם מתו מירי כוחותינו. תעצרו את הטירוף הזה, תחזירו אותנו למשפחות שלנו כל עוד אנחנו בחיים, תחזירו.
Yeah, this is almost all the clip that Hamas produced, and it hasn't been aired on Israeli TV. Only on social media you can watch it, but you couldn't see it on any of the Israeli media outlets because of the decision of the editors-in-chief not to cooperate with the propaganda and emotional blackmail of the Hamas. The last part, which cut out from the original clip, in the last 10 seconds or so, you can see the 2 bodies of the 2 guys. So if someone is not convinced that she is telling the truth, the Hamas took a picture of the 2 guys who are not alive, unfortunately, and to show that they are really not alive. We don't know if the story she is telling is truth or not. We can just know that the Hamas is eager for a ceasefire, because that's the request of her. Stop the war, stop the war, stop the war. All of them talking about stopping the war. And this is the Hamas wish right now. We don't know if they were killed by Israel or murdered by the Hamas, but we know for sure, and the army announced that they are not alive. And one of the questions that, as a former senior journalist, I asked myself, is this the right decision? Because the world watches it. The Israelis can watch it on social media if they want, but it's not part. There was a report that there is a new clip of the Hamas without showing it. Hamas published a clip of three hostages claiming 2 are dead without showing it. And one of the questions I all the time ask myself, is this the right decision right now of the editors, all the editors of all the 4 national channels in Israel decided that this kind of clips sent and produced by the Hamas will not be aired. Now, we should know that the ability of Israeli people, the Israeli audience, the consumers of media, their ability and their tolerance to listen to the other side doesn't exist right now. I said before that the first few weeks were under a shock and trauma, and they are now into a feeling, excuse me, a public feeling of anger and revenge. Anger, revenge, and feeling of never again. Israel cannot allow the Hamas to stay and plan the next massacre or the next rocket firing to cities and villages near the border or in Tel Aviv. And this is probably the reason that what we see on the networks around the world is not being on air on Israeli TV, which means also the footage coming from Gaza Strip. Here in Canada and other parts of the world, I'm sure also, yes, in the US and Europe, there is a lot of footage coming of the destruction and casualties, many casualties, thousands of casualties in Gaza Strip. But the Israelis are focusing on their own narrative, the Israeli narrative of being victims for modern anti-Semitism, of hatred of Jews, and barbaric, inhuman, sadistic killing of men, women, and babies, beheading people, killing families, just because of hatred to Jews and to Israelis. And the Israelis are not accepting right now a narrative. There is a minority, including in the media, but it's a very tiny minority that believes, and we can see it mainly in Haaretz newspaper online, that believe that the Israelis should see the consequences of the event, not that they justify the events in Gaza or the killing, not that they think that Israel should have done nothing after the massacre, but the fact that the decision of the editors-in-chief is to prevent the Israelis to watch the war from the other side is a mistake. Now, what's the reason for the decision of the media to play on one narrative? First of all, the Israeli mood. The editors feel the audience, and they understand that people don't want to watch. They just don't want to watch. So it's a time of a war, and the media is not objective. The Israeli media is first and foremost Israeli media, which represent and broadcast and writes and deliver the news and the analysis for Israelis. It's not someone from another planet or from the UN. So the editors feel that they are in the midst of a war, and they have a role to show the audience according to the public mood. The other reason, and I'm saying it here loud and clear, is the question of the rating. If the media start showing the suffering of the Palestinian side, the rating will drop, there will be less commercials, they will lose money because the Israelis are not there to watch this right now. So the reason is rating / income of the networks, mainly the commercial networks, the three of them. And the other reason is the public mood, which is a very, very strong. When you listen to the Israeli media, you hear that they are talking about our heroes, the soldiers who wounded or died, our hostages, and our victims of terror. It's ours. It's ours. The media is there. Israel is still, and as I said, I came back from a couple of days. I traveled with the Toronto Federation, still mourning and still in a long-term shiva of what happened on October the 7th. And it brings to the question, what's the role of the media in times of war, at times of a war? And what's the role of the media in times of a mourning, of a shiva? And some journalists say publicly that part of the roles of the media in a time of a war, such a crucial war for the future of Israel, is to try to raise the moral of the people, not just to report. The Israeli media is not objective, it's not impartial, it's not bipartisan, it's an Israeli media, and as I said, many journalists and decision makers in the media, they take 1 mile forward and say, no, it's not just news, facts, and analysis. It's much more than that. We have a role. We are in a war. We all together were attacked. There was a question of the stability of the life, of the future of the Jewish state. And we are together in that fight. It's not just the soldiers are fighting, it's all of us, including in the newsrooms. We are, and our friends are also in a reserve service right now, fighting in Gaza, or maybe at the north, which is another question, where the north is going. But when in a time of a war, we should be there for our viewers. And when you see and you watch Israeli TV, you see lots of flags on the screen, small flags sometimes, and the subtitles that there is the Israeli flag. We are together and we support you at the time, this difficult time. We are here to comfort you, to help you to go through the crisis. Not that we are psychologists, but this is part of our role to try to support a mourning people that was so devastated after the atrocities and the barbaric terror attack of October the 7th. And this is a very interesting approach. I'm sure there will be lots of theses in the university. What's the role of the media in a war? We should think also, it reminds me sometimes the American media when the war in Iraq started back 20 years ago under George W. Bush. Where was the media? What was the role of the media in the United States? It's not exactly the same, but it's again a state in a situation of war. And the media is not trying to be very objective. So the Israeli media is totally right now one-sided and sometimes being criticized of playing the role of the IDF spokesperson and giving the information through the binoculars of the army which also has an interest because the army wants to show a success, and the army wants to try to rehabilitate and recover from what happened when the army failed totally to protect the people and have intelligence about what's going to happen. So the army has an interest, and the media is sometimes criticized by cooperating with the interests of the army on the expense of the knowledge of the public, and also on the expense of the facts from the front, which are not always crystal clear, as it's sometimes being seen by spokespersons. That's the role. Now, it also connected to the situation in the world, because Israel has to, after the first, I would say, week or two, when the world was standing by Israel, including after Israel was so severely attacked, including in the media, the mood had changed as long as the footage arrived from Gaza and still coming from there. And the sentiment, the anti-Israel sentiment with the rise of anti-Semitism is growing. And Israel finds itself trying to be at the defense and trying to explain why there are so many civilian casualties and where it goes to. And it's not always easy, because Israel was attacked, and people say that 1,200 people were murdered, but in Gaza, dozens of thousands are dying. Where is the balance? And this is not an easy task for Israelis, and not easy task for Israeli journalists. But the bottom line of this is that the Israeli media is first and foremost Israeli media, like the American media is first and foremost American media. Israel is a small place. Those of you who visited Israel, or those of you who had family and friends in Israel, know it. It's such a small place that everybody knows someone or a family of the abducted hostages, or of the victims who were killed, murdered on October the 7th, or family of, or a soldier out of 200 soldiers that died since the war began, because around 200 soldiers were killed in the battle in Gaza Strip. So in Israel, everybody knows everybody, and it's very personal. It's not a huge state, and the personal factor has its cost, and its cause also, it's a heavy weight for us in the media and decision making. It's not separated. Before I open to questions, I'd like to raise two questions that came to my mind in the recent weeks. There are two documentaries which were produced in the last few weeks. One about the Nova Festival and one about the atrocities. The Nova Festival film was produced by a private producer. It's about 55 minutes, I think, or around 50 minutes, showing the party, the end of the party, and it's based mainly on footage that the young adults who were partying took on their social media and on their phones, with the permission, obviously, of the families, because not many of them survived. And it shows them hiding under bushes, running, driving like crazy to get out and saying there are so many bodies here and there. It's not very graphic, but it gives us, the viewers, the feeling, the horror feeling of escaping from death, from killers, from murderers. And at the end of this film, it says who survived and who didn't survive, because in the film we don't know. Only at the end we know with the slides who died and who didn't survive. It's not easy to watch, obviously, but it cannot be compared to the other film produced by the IDF of 48 minutes of the atrocities, where you actually see the terrorists, the barbarian terrorists killing. It's based on CCTV, the cameras, and the cameras that the GoPro that the terrorists came with, and by the rescuers. It's lots of footage. I watched the two films. They are not. I think the Nova is open to the public, maybe on YouTube. The other one is not, totally not. It's not a public domain. It's shown for the purpose is to show it to decision makers in different parliaments, in the Senate, in Ottawa, and in the UN, to show the world, but not to show the people of the world, only the influential people, the elite. And after I watched it, I had a feeling, I came out with a feeling, not that I mean, there is not right and wrong here, that it has to be a public domain. And I asked, why is it not? And the answer I received, because you see the faces and the families to respect the victims. But with our world, it's very easy to blur any face or any plate number that you can recognize who is the victim exactly. So I don't think this is the real reason why they don't put it on YouTube. I can understand why they don't want to put it on TV, though they can put it on late night and say that this is a very, very hard film to watch and warn before watching. But I felt that if we want to make change in the public opinion in the world, the people should watch it, despite the fact that it's very, very difficult. I haven't seen something like that in my lifetime. We haven't had such a massacre in Israel in our lifetime. And it shows it quite explicitly, what they did, what happened, and how they butchered people, and in all the kibbutzim and little towns not far away from Gaza Strip. So 14 weeks after the event, we are not close to even to think of recovering as a nation, as a media, as a nation, as a public, as the army, as citizens. We don't know how the world will look like after this, once the war is ended, once all the war is over. What's the security of the Israeli people in the south and in the north? Will the Hamas cut the abilities to fire rockets, or it's another tough, difficult round, and there will be more rounds, as it was in the last 15 years, Israel against the Hamas and Hamas against Israel. So it all comes to the media that decided that it's taking side as an Israeli media, by all means, and reflects the narrative of the Israelis as they see it. As I said, there is criticism that this might not be the right side, the right thing to do, but and there are some doubts. But this is the situation right now in Israel and in the media, and it's not easy to hear the news when soldiers are being killed almost every day, Israeli soldiers. And I had a conversation with one of the officers who is in Gaza. Most of the time we met him, and he said that I'm busy protecting my people. My heart and mind are not with the Palestinians right now. I'm sorry, I said, but I'm busy to protect the Israelis so no massacre can happen again, ever. And there is no room for other people right now in my heart or in my mind. And with that quote, I'll stop here, and I'd like to welcome questions if you have about this or other things that I can answer. So please.
Why you're very highly experienced in Israeli media? Why we constantly lose the global media battle?
Because of the cameras. It's not easy to see the destruction in Gaza. There is a lot of... Gaza City almost doesn't exist. And many women and children paid in their lives because the Hamas uses the Palestinian civilian as human shields. And I've heard that the soldiers are always shocked when they go into a kindergarten to see how many missiles there are in the kindergarten, because the Palestinian thought, if it's a kindergarten, Israel will never bomb it. Or if it's a hospital, let's build the tunnels under the hospital because it will be protected and it will protect our munition. And under mosques and inside mosques, the Hamas, they not just don't care about the human lives of the Jews. They don't care about their own people's lives, because everything is for the cause to get rid of the Zionist state, including sacrificing the Palestinians. So the fact that the civilians are human shields, and now Israel declared that Israel is chasing the leaders of the Hamas, and probably the hostages are protecting the leaders of the Hamas, that if they are killed, Israel will kill their own citizens. They don't care about human lives. And once it reflects in the camera, it's not easy to watch in the world. And all the explanation that Israel has to justify, once you watch the footage coming there, it's not easy. And the public opinion, and also Israel is always the stronger part. It doesn't matter that Israel suffered the atrocity of 1,200 people and was attacked by Hamas terrorists, sadistic terrorists, and it doesn't matter at the end that the way they killed kids and beheaded their families, their parents. Israel is the Goliath in this equation, and it's very difficult to explain why this war is so important, and to explain that if Israel doesn't do the war against the Islamic extremists, they might continue to other part of the world, and Israel is in the front. It's not easy.
But do you think, I'm asking you as an experienced journalist, do you think Israel should do different in order to win more? If the narrative doesn't pass, or what should we do different?
I thought that now we go to a question, has Israel done lots of things for peace in the last 10 years or not? When Rabin was the prime minister and there was a process with the Palestinians, or Sharon made a few very tough operations in the West Bank, but he also got to the disengagement out of Gaza. So when the world saw that Israel is trying to reach a solution, not necessarily an agreement, because the unilateral disengagement from Gaza was not an agreement. But when Israel is trying to find a solution and not freezing the situation for stagnation, the world is more tolerant. When Israel says there is no partner right now, and we will wait for the partner in the next 10 years, 50 years, 60 years, or 100 years, the world doesn't accept that this is a fate, that there will be bloodshed forever. Now, this is a policy. Right now, I would release the film. I would go everywhere I can with the film to show, to convince people. Sometimes said it's fake. It can't happen. But you know about in 1940, people said the gas chambers were also fake. I'm not talking about these people. I'm talking about other people who are not sure that this. Once you see the film, you understand why Israel cannot just sit and wait. So it has to be exposed to many more. That's my feeling. Yes, more questions.
Yeah?
Yes.
I want to emphasize, go back to what my friends here just said, and I'm not holding you to any of it. It's just that you're using your expertise in the media. It seems to me there's really a fundamental problems with the communication coming from Israel. To start with, I do agree with you that they need to show the documentary, but that's not all there is to it. I've been watching foreign news medias and local news medias, and I'm sorry to say that when I watch Palestinian figures speaking so eloquently and so intelligently, while I hear a member of parliament from Israel, and I'm very, very sadly saying that they sounds very arrogant and ignorant, while I hear officers who cannot barely speak English try to communicate into international media.
Yeah.
And their point does not cross to the right people, and the point that they cross is the wrong point.
But don't
And
forget
I don't know why Israel doesn't invest more into talking to the public through local news channels.
Well, first of all, Israel has the best English communicator in the world. His name is Benjamin Netanyahu. He is better than any Palestinian, and he appeared on the different networks in the US and at the beginning of the war. President Herzog also gave quite a few media interviews. We have a very good spokesperson of the government who is doing a lot of work on the media. He's a British origin, and you hear his British accent. We have IDF people in English who are doing, and in Arabic, by the way, also there is one famous who is an officer who speaks to Al Jazeera and Arab media outlets. Could done more, and I agree that the members of parliament are not articulate as we want, but we do have speakers, and we do have, I agree, it's not enough. It's not enough, but there are, I just mentioned 5, probably there are a few more who are doing the best they can. And here is the question: is it a problem of explaining the situation, problem of English, or a problem of policy? If you think, now I'm not saying what's each one has its own, his or her opinion. But if people think that the problem is a policy, the best English American speaker will not be able to explain the policy. It doesn't help. I mean, Israel in the territories for 50 years cannot make any agreement. The agreement that Israel made collapsed, and there was no, so this is a policy. If the question is being more articulate and more professional in that term, Israel, I agree, needs more people, but it does have some very good speakers. I agree with you, it's not enough. Next question, if there are any questions. Yes, please, ma'am.
From your experience, what can we do different to get the support of the WOC generation? Apparently, we're not doing very well with the young generation, who apparently are ignorant to understand what the Jewish state is, and from the river to the sea. And I'm not sure we can understand which river and what sea, but very supportive of the pro-Palestinian narratives. What can we do with your experience? What can we do different to gain their support?
To get the support, okay, of the young people?
People
So-
between the age of the college age, between
Yeah.
18.
Well, I'll tell you what I think, and I also told my colleagues here in Canada. There are a couple of things. First of all, lots of social media to train, to work. The Toronto Federation, once after a few days after, or a week or two after the atrocities, opened a social media war room with young people who volunteered to do social media, and a lot, answering, provoking, raising issues, be there, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. I think it's still important. Now, if the older generation is not accessible, has less access, but everybody has nephews and grandchildren or children, I need your help. I want to say A, B, and C. Let's probably, I mean, I'm sure that the Jews can do more on social media. It's true that the Arab world is larger and it's vocal, but if I ask the people in the room, how many of you did something on social media in the last 14 weeks, or contributed, not by yourself, by the grandson who is in college, who can do more? I'm not sure the majority will say, yes, we did. So this is one thing, social media with friends, with relatives. This is the time of war, and we need your help to do this and this and this. Once a week, I want to write a post and to publish it. I need your help to do that. Or let's do together a clip on Instagram. You have such a wonderful, and I'm your aunt. I want to be there with you, or I want you to do something that will be more vocal about the issue. This is one thing. The other thing, we in the Jewish Agency, we have a program which is called the Israeli Fellows, and it's in the campuses and in the universities. There are 76, I think, in North America, and we can bring more. It depends on the budget of Hillel and federations. I would love to see the number doubled. I think bringing Israelis who served in the army at the age of 23 to 27 to be in campuses and 24/7, except of one day a week, working with students to support the students, to give them pride, not to be afraid to go with a necklace of the Star of David, to be more vocal on social media, on the campuses. I think it's crucial. Now it comes to the budget. Federation says we have the budget for 76. I would say 150 is more effective. I told the Canadians the same thing. We don't have many. And people who are focusing on that goal to protect, defend, support, be vocal for Israel, that's their task. They are Israeli patriots, and they can do a lot. But it's up to the federations and the Jewish communities if they want them to come. We can offer, but I think much more can be done. That's my personal feeling also as a representative of the Jewish Agency. We have time for two more.
Right. So what you just said, I've tried on social media. I've got a good amount of friends on Facebook, and I'll make posts asking for support. Nothing. I mean, 1, 2, 3, maybe. Absolutely nothing. And I can't believe it. But my point of that is, I've talked to people. I see all the Palestinian videos of people supporting them. I've tried talking very nicely to them, as rude as they are, very nicely. The ignorance is just, you can't get through. So my question is, how long how long are we wanting to wait for the public opinion to be good about? I mean, and what's the ultimate consequence if Israel just goes in there and does what needs to be done to get the people home?
Yeah, well, Israel doesn't work according to the social media. Israel is working according to the rockets that are fired to Tel Aviv. That's we should remember. Israel will, I mean, the public opinion mainly represented by governments could be influential, mainly by the U.S. administration, which has a huge influence on the state of Israel. And the Israelis really appreciated the support of the president when he came over as the first world leader to stand by Israel after the atrocities. So wars cannot go forever, but as long as Israel thinks that there is a risk and a danger to Israelis near the border, don't forget that 125,000 people cannot get back to their homes. They live in a temporary residential areas or in hotels. I visited one hotel. They don't even have a stove in the room because in a room of hotel room, there is no stove. So they have to go to the public kitchen of the kibbutz, the common kitchen to cook. It's very, very hard. And if those 125,000 people cannot get back home, Israel won't stop. And if rockets will be fired to Tel Aviv area or Sderot. So social media is important, support of the public is important, but the life of the Israelis is more important. We should know that. And we can do whatever we can, each one of us, wherever we are, try to help in the public opinion and try to make a change. I was invited here in Toronto a week ago for lunch with maybe 10 people who are managing companies to talk about the situation. It was an initiative of one of them. And he said, I need you to come to talk and to explain. And I did it because I felt this is part of my jobs to try to get more support of the people who might have doubts. So everyone can do that in a working place with friends, Jews or non-Jews. Yes, any other questions?
Yaron, just of the subject, could you speak into the situation with South Africa trying to sue Israel?
Well, the South Africans took they are now the diplomatic Hamas supporters in the world. It's not going to go any better, and I doubt if the diplomatic relationship between Israel and South Africa could continue. There are 50,000 Jews in South Africa. I'm sure many will leave because it's just now the tennis player, it was tennis, the player who was blamed of being pro-Israel and was kicked out.
Was in Turkey. It was in Turkey.
No, there was also in South Africa, a Jew in South Africa.
It was the captain of the baseball team, I think. The
baseball.
Yeah.
No, this is anti-Semitism in a very clear-cut way. So I doubt if they can stay in such a situation when the South African foreign minister called the Hamas to congratulate them 3 days after the atrocities. So South Africa, part of the game they are playing for the Hamas is suing Israel. And Israel was a great ally of the South African in the past.
It's very sad. I used to live there.
Yeah, yeah, it's not going to go anywhere good in the next few years. It's quite clear. Last question.
Mark.
Yeah.
In just a few days after the October 7th, I think it was the first time Bibi was on TV and with a press conference with his coalition. Anyways, I just knew after that speech that one of the most Googled words would be Amalek. And you speak of narrative, which is a term I don't remember growing up listening to the news. We had Walter Cronkite and David Brinkley, and they would tell you what happened, the facts.
Yeah.
But there was no analysis. To find analysis, you had to actually think. So now the problem with the narrative is people always have to have a narrative. If you listen to one, it's impossible to pry people away from that. How does this work over there?
This is the new media. You first have your opinions, then you talk about the facts. It's all over the world. It's not only in the US, it's also in Israel. But let me conclude by saying that I believe that Israel will win the war, despite what we hear, because Israel has no other choice. Israel must win and cannot stay next to such a horrible enemy on its border. The game must change, and the equation must change. And it's not going to be easy. It might take, not in this full-scale war, but Israel will not accept the continuance of a situation in the last 15 years. That's, I can tell you, this is the mood in Israel, and the mood is to support the soldiers, to support the IDF, not necessarily support the political leadership, but support the troops of what they are doing and admire their sacrifice and their energy to work. Some people left homes 3 months ago and came only for 1 day or so because they know that there is a mission, and people admire them and support them and love them for what they are doing. So if we look back in the last 75 years, Israel had many obstacles and challenges, wars, assassination of prime minister, economy crisis, and Israel did overcome because there is no other place for the Jews to go. So that's our fate and this is our destiny. And I'm quite sure that at the end of the day, situation will improve. It's a hope and a belief together. So I'd like to thank you very much for having me tonight. And I wish you all the best. Thank you, Achacha, for organizing it, and good night from Toronto.
Thank you very much. I think we could also not only hear your words, but feel the feelings you brought together with you from watching those movies and from just returning from Israel. I feel that you brought some of it with you, and tonight gave us some of those feelings. Thank you very much for this. Have a good night.
Good night.
Laila tov.
Laila tov.
Laila tov. Stay warm.
Thank you, everyone. Stay warm. Have a drive back home safely.